Hi, everyone. I hope you're live and welcome to today's Memgraph community call. I'm Matea from the DX team here, and today we are joined by my colleague Ante, also from the same team. Ante, it's great to have you here again. Ante was a host for a few times now, I think. So yeah, we are up for a fun community call again. In this session, Anta will be diving into agent skills, what they are, why they matter, and how we can use them to make agents actually useful in real-world engineering workflows. Besides this call today, we also have a few more upcoming community calls in the next 3 weeks. So I'll make sure to post links in the chat so you can register to those as well. And the first one is, so other than this one, the next one is on the topic of atomic GraphRAG, which is hosted by our CTO, Marko Budiselic, on the next Tuesday, so February 17th. So make sure not to miss that as well. Now, before we get started, just a quick note that we have a chat open, so feel free to chat with each other or drop your questions there as we go. And we'll make time towards the end of the community call for a quick Q&A session. So yeah, I think that's it. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Ante.
Thanks for the intro, Matea. So hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about agent skills. I guess at some point you read something about that somewhere in the last 2 to 3 months, I would say. So I'm kind of curious if you can kind of give thumbs up or thumbs down if you have built agent skill so far, like any skill so far. If somebody had built it, thumbs up. If you didn't build it, thumbs down. Yeah, and I will later kind of check the response on that. The idea why we talk about this is obviously we live in a domain of kind of crazy AI development. So we are all kind of figuring out how we can leverage the tools to our advantage. And one of the things is obviously we in Memgraph also think in the same direction, like how can we support other people who are using Memgraph or kind of starting with Memgraph, and obviously how can we kind of leverage the tools inside of Memgraph as a company to be more productive around it. So the plan for today is for those who were not so familiar with Memgraph, I will do very short intro of Memgraph. Then we are going to talk about agent skills. Then we are going to talk about Memgraph skills, and then I will show you the demo. In kind of in terms of time, the most of the time we'll spend on agent skills and the demo. So I think it should be fun. We're doing a live demo, so we'll see how that one goes. For those who are not so familiar with Memgraph, just a few intro slides. So Memgraph is a high-performance in-memory graph database that serves a real-time kind of use cases. Lately, it has been mostly around the AI, GraphRAG, and kind of the newer use cases that kind of are popping. Obviously, there are also the database use cases still relevant, but these new things are more and more powered by Memgraph. A lot of other tools and libraries, I would say, use Memgraph under the hood for memory layers, for structuring the data, or for retrieval, or something like that. There are three components to Memgraph. Memgraph Lab, you are going to see that part during the demo. I can even briefly show you now. So it's a user interface of Memgraph. Then there is Memgraph database that we are going to leverage. And then there is a MAGE. So kind of the key component we are going to talk today about is essentially the MAGE, because you'll see why. But the MAGE is like a collection of algorithms that we have that live next to the Memgraph. Memgraph provides the API for those algorithms to be able to kind of access the storage and do some compute. Those APIs are in Python, Rust, and C++, and we are going to talk about that specifically today. So what Memgraph MAGE gives you, in a sense, is if you have a Cypher query and you're querying the graph, is you can call some custom procedure. In this particular case, so we have like a query that connects generators, and then it matches the two nodes, and then it checks, well, like what is the max flow between these two endpoints, and can get the paths and their flows back, kind of finding the maximum flow problem. And this syntax, so call max flow get paths, is essentially the call of a query module in Memgraph MAGE. That query module could be written in C++, Python, or Rust, as I said. And the question is, like, who will write that query module? I mean, usually it is us building it, but as today more and more people are kind of embracing AI tools and getting familiar with them, there is like bigger velocity of development that you can do, and essentially people are now will much easier build these query modules, and you can build something like that. You could build it before, but now it's much easier. So the typical problem is like, who will build that query module? And this is something that we kind of see on our daily job, is like we have this query module that we need to build, and then that there is a task like write the Python query module in Memgraph that will return all node labels in Memgraph. So this is a super simple query module that you can write. And the question is like, how would you describe a person that has that skill? So that person will probably know the Python, that person will probably know the query modules API, it will probably know how the query modules infrastructure in Memgraph works, and it will kind of understand how to test that query module. So that would be all kind of relevant knowledge to human engineer writing the query module for getting the labels, for example, from the node. That would be the simplest hello world example. The question is, can we build an agent to do it, or just write a skill? And that's why we are talking about that today. Like, how can we improve this via the skills? So now talking about the agent skills, I will kind of introduce them as a general concept, and then I will go back to actually apply it to the problem of a human engineer skill in Memgraph, and how can you actually use it. So what are they even like? This is a definition that you can find on the web of agent skills. It says that they are the folders of instruction scripts and resources that agents can discover and use to do things more accurately and efficiently. So if you kind of look at these two sentences, they're in two parts. The first part is essentially saying what they are, so what the skills are, and they're basically a text files and or files. And the second part is saying what problem are they solving. So basically, they will help you solve the problem more efficiently and accurately. But more on that later. How did we come to these agent skills? So 2 months ago, or no, maybe 4 months ago, Anthropic essentially introduced the concept of skills. It was October 16, 2025. And people started to see the skills and potential in skills, and it went kind of quite into interesting direction. They also made it in the process, made it an open standard. So essentially, there is a cross-platform compatibility between the agents that are consuming the skills. The open standard is now kind of public to contribute, and it's public from December 18, 2025. So we are talking like 2 months ago. In the meantime, every kind of AI development agent like Cloud Code, Codex, Copilot, OpenCode, Antigravity, etc., essentially added the support for agent skills in the last 2 months. So everybody kind of jumped on that wagon of adopting the skills, and they seems to be pretty useful. So that's quite reasonable to do. And if you kind of go to agent skills, if you go to this URL agentskills.io.home, you will essentially go to this page, and on this page you will see what agent skills are, how are they defined, what the specification is, etc. So most of the things that I'm going to talk today about is based on this website, so agentskills.io. I would recommend that you check it out. And it says here open format for extending AI agent capabilities with specialized knowledge and workflows. And now we get to the actual meat of how you should think about this. So far we have been building like the agent for a specific use case. So for example, we built a coding agent, we built a research agent, we built a query module agent, we built a migration agent. So an example of migration agent is SQL to graph agent that we built that kind of moves the SQL data to actual graph model and then performs the migration. The idea with the skills is why would we even build like these all custom agents when we could have like a one general purpose agent that has different skills? So one agent that consumes different skills. Why is this better? Because it's much easier to change the actual behavior of an agent. You don't need to actually change the code behavior of an agent. You can do it in a skill while the code is being a universal interface. What it means is that let's say you want your general agent to generate a presentation in your style of your company style. You can just add that skill to the agent. You don't need to change the actual code. Or let's say you want to teach your agent how to code a query module in Memgraph. You can just pass a query module skill in this case. So what is interesting to us as a Memgraph is like we are thinking how can we develop a query modules and how can we add that skill to the agent. And I guess the same thing can be applied to your companies specifically. And there are also the tasks inside of company that we are looking at, like how can we use the skill to apply it to a particular problem or a task to be able to solve it more efficiently. So when you think about building the architecture or solving a problem with the AI, you would previously you would build a specific agent. Now you should more think about how to leverage these general agents to actually solve some problem with them. When I say a general agent, I'm here referring to like big LLM models like Claude, Opus, or like ChatGPT 5 point something, or like these bigger LLM models that are more like general in a sense. And they are just being consumed by the the code around, for example, a Cloud Code or something like that. But they're very general. Yeah, and what I wanted to say here is, as long as they are able to kind of produce the code or a script or any kind of text file, you will be able to build different experiences with them. It can be like something like coding a query module in any language or creating a presentation. It's the same. If you can kind of output the code that creates presentation or an image or whatever, you're able to actually generate it from the skill. So what value does that agent skills bring to that general agent? So the domain expertise here, like what is the domain expertise of Memgraph people? So one of the things is like writing query modules. So not a lot of people know how to actually write the query module in Memgraph, how to connect it in Decipher, how to use it, etc. So that is that domain knowledge. There's also new capabilities. So as I previously said, it's much easier to change the behavior of an agent. You can easily change behavior of an Claude Opus by just providing a skill rather than writing a custom workflow inside of some framework like LangGraph, Llama Index, etc. The skills are repeatable because you can essentially, in a skill, you can outline the workflow as a kind of recipe, and the LLM should generally follow, and it should follow. If it kind of diverges from the problem, you can provide in a skill how it can recover. So it's not intended for a skill to be very rigid. It's more like when you are as a person performing some reasoning of how something should be applied in a general sense, that should end up in a skill as a skill. It's not like a fixed pipeline that is happening every single time. And there is also an interoperability point. So the skills are can be used by different general agents. So any agentic system that supports skills can consume skill. You can even use the skills and reference them in between. So this is also an interesting concept. So all of these things that I kind of mentioned now are on this website, and they're kind of discussed into the more details. And there are also more general examples. So I would recommend everybody to kind of skim through and read if some of these kind of things doesn't make sense at the moment, or ask a question for Q&A later. One of the big things that happened as the skills were released was this problem about MCP, that MCP is consuming too much context, which is true. So the skills use progressive disclosure to manage that context efficiency. So they are not loaded immediately, and they are not loaded all. And I will kind of explain later how that actually works. So what skills kind of bring is that you can have like thousands and thousands of skills with your general agent that solve particular company problems with a particular domain expertise for you, with particular capabilities that you write. There's I'm talking a lot about these abstract terms, but essentially on a practical example, it will be much clearer. So how that skill looks like. You have essentially a folder that has a skill .markdown file, and this markdown file includes name and description. So that's like a metadata, that's minimum, plus the useful stuff. So what's the useful stuff? The useful stuff is whatever thing you need to do with the general agent and you want to achieve. And the skills can also have an optional resources. It could be a scripts, which would be kind of executable code in a, let's say, Python script or something like that. It can be references, which could be a documentation or any kind of doc file that kind of resembles the skill, or some kind of assets. Let's say that you have a template, how would you like to generate all the images, or template, how would you want to format all the code, or something like that. Then you can have an asset that describes that. But the definition of resources is quite general. It's just important that they are linked to the skill on places where you need them. Now let's take a look at an example of a skill. So as I previously said, we are going to talk about the query modules today. And here, if you go to Memgraph skills on GitHub, you'll essentially see our skills. And one of the skills in Memgraph is Memgraph Python query modules. I will shortly open this raw overview. And this is what essentially the skill is. So this is that metadata that I was mentioning. And this is how that skill looks like. Just to kind of highlight, so it kind of says when to use it, what are the prerequisites, add some quick references like key types, how the query module procedures can be used, and then there goes to the rest of the skill. I will go back to that a bit later. But this is essentially the skill. So it's just a markdown file defined in a particular way, defined by that specification page that I was mentioning. So to kind of dive into more details of that specification and this progressive disclosure is that the metadata part of the skill, in this case for Memgraph Python query modules, is always loaded. So that means that if you have 1,000 skills, all of the metadata from every skill will be loaded immediately into the context of agent that is that you're using. So as soon as you start the agent, it will try to find all the skill files and metadata in them. So that's how the agent knows what skills it has on its disposal. Once you write something like, let's write a Memgraph Python query modules, at that point, it will load the instructions. So it says load when triggered. That means when you write your prompt and say, okay, agent, or okay, Claude, I need help writing the Memgraph help with Memgraph query module, it will essentially load the instructions. So going back to that example of query or of a skill. So this is the metadata, and then the rest is the instructions of the skill, how that skill is actually being used. And resources are loaded as they are needed, essentially. That means that when LLM kind of needs more information, it will look, is there a resource that describes that problem? Let's say that it has problem understanding the Python API of a query module. Then what it will do, it will go to the skill, it will go to the reference and try to find, is there a definition for example, MGP vertex, which essentially represents a node in Memgraph, and this is the API of that node. So the reference files are kind of more detailed descriptions of the skill. There are some limits. The name in the metadata can be just up to 64 characters. Description can be, I think, up to 1,000 characters. Then there is like the instruction should be under 500 lines of code. So you obviously need to take care of that context in a sense that you don't write too big skills. So they should fit into that specification. But resources can be abundant, so you can have more resources there if you want to actually kind of have a very complex skill there. One of the things that was very kind of controversial when the skills kind of released, everybody was talking like, what's happening with MCP? Is MCP even relevant, etc.? And the answer is yes. So MCP still fits into the agent ecosystem, essentially, but it has a different role. So skills are like a knowledge base. So you kind of add your domain expertise, how the agent should act based on the skill you provided. And then that agent has an access to the MCP servers, which essentially provide the data from like a database. They provide the tools and the access to the actual data. So they are kind of the plumbing and the pipeline of the data that you can kind of read from or write to, while the skill is kind of dictating what it wants to do. So the skill is just like a knowledge base, and the MCP servers are here to kind of provide the data, tools, and access. In this case, like you would have a skill for I don't know, traversing Memgraph, something like that, and then the actual MCP server would be responsible for getting to the Memgraph and reading the data from Memgraph or writing that data to Memgraph. So I just have this slide to kind of highlight that it's not that MCP is dead because of the skills, or skills are dead because of the MCP. So no, they live and serve different purposes. It is true that MCP context overload, because all of the tools overloaded immediately as you kind of plug the MCP servers. That is the problem of the MCP, but there are also lazy loading and kind of there are features coming in to solve the problem, but the skills are essentially serve another purpose. That's the point. So the Anthropic essentially released this table. It's from the blog called Blog Skills Explained, and this table essentially describes like the actual kind of, let's say, AI resource, like a skill, prompt, subagent, MCP. So what it provides, how it persists, what it contains, when it loads, can include code, and what is best for. And then if you kind of focused on the skills, you'll see that the skills are dynamic. So they load when you ask for them and when you need them. And they are both best for specialized expertise. So essentially providing those best practices and giving those agents a specific knowledge that not everybody have, or that are very specific to your organization or to things that you essentially do. While the MCP, on the other hand, is the data access or tools in general. I mean, I won't read the whole table, but that's kind of, this brings like a bit clearer picture of how the skills fit into the whole thing. So just to comment on the sub-agents, as sub-agent are just like concurrency in a software. So essentially kind of delegate tasks to another thing, and then that thing just reiterates the same way as the individual agent would. Yeah, now like we kind of passed the theoretical part of trying to understand what skill is and what the purpose is. And now we are talking about essentially the memgraph skills and how are we thinking about it. And as you can see, it's just 2 months old or 3 months old thing. So how can we apply that into the memgraph context? And we are going back to that human engineer skill in memgraph that needs to write the Python query module in memgraph that will return all the node labels in memgraph. So as I said, like you would describe that person as somebody who understands Python, understands query modules and Python API, understands query module infrastructure, knows how to test it. And of course, we have created a skill for this. So you don't need to know essentially this. Of course, you need to know something, but this is just like in a sense that it will be much easier and faster for you to develop once you have the skill. And memgraph skills are from today available at github.com memgraph/skills. So here they are. And this is like the Python query module skill that I was just mentioning. There's also a CPP query module and Rust query module. So all of these skills are made for writing query modules. And there is also a GraphRAG skill. So why would we have skills for this? So maybe on the surface it doesn't seem like a problem, but writing, for example, a Rust query module means that you need to build or compile a library somewhere, and then you need to move that library into the memgraph container. That memgraph container needs to maintain API compatibility with that source, and then you need to actually move it and run it and test it as it run, and it's kind of bothersome to move it between the containers, etc. So what if we instruct the agent to do it? So we can kind of minimize the effort on the user side or on engineer side and help them move with that. So that's why we created those skills for writing the query modules. Same goes for Python, C++, and Rust. And then there's also Memgraph GraphRAG. So think about like if you're building a GraphRAG pipeline that's very general, you could have a skill that defines how that GraphRAG pipeline can be built with Memgraph, like what prerequisite you need, how to build indexes inside. So essentially like a best practices built into that skill that we think are the best practices, and you can consume them with your agent. So it's like having our recipe of how would we actually build that for yourself and for your company. Yeah, but there are like two ways that we view on this. So one is the external facing skills. So that would be like we have built this skill for you to use when you're using Memgraph for like writing a query module, or we are building an internal skill that we are going to use. Obviously, internal skills can be used by external people because they're public, but they're built specifically for somebody like Memgraph storage reviewers, for somebody who will review a Memgraph storage PR and somebody who will check some of like defaults that we want to check every single time in a review, and to automate that process. So if you go to that link, you'll see another example of a skill built internally for us. And essentially, most of the repositories in, I guess, upcoming weeks will have some kind of skills inside of them that will describe how that skill can be used. The question is like, what skill would you need from Memgraph? That would be an interesting thing. So if you have ideas, definitely let us know or open an issue on this repository, and we will probably consider adding that type of skill to our skill repo. So we talked a lot. I think now is the best time to actually try to use that skill. So I will quickly move to my VS Code. So just to understand what we have in the background. So I have a Memgraph here running. I'm going to load something inside. Let's load that docs, that small dataset. Cool. So we have like some nodes and some edges inside. And now, let's see. Do we have the skills? So yeah, something that I didn't say is that skills can live inside of your repository, or they can live in your home directory. If they live in the repository, they're higher priority and they apply to repository skills. If they live on your home directory, they apply generally to every agent you are running on that machine. So I have I'm using mostly Copilot here in the VS Code. So if I go to CD Copilot, I have nothing inside at the moment, and I will git clone skills into skills. So I'm cloning the Memgraph skills to my Copilot config. And I will go to skills, and here are the skills that I just showed on the Memgraph repo. So the skill for writing a C++ query module, Python and Rust query modules, and doing a GraphRAG with Memgraph. And now they're in my home directory in Copilot skills. That means that every instance of a Copilot that I use on this machine will have an access to that skills. But just to show it, let's see. Let's open a code here so that you see those skills. So yeah, they are here. And now let's try to actually, let's see, Memgraph is running. It's called Memgraph GraphRAG. So let's say something like this. Can you write a Memgraph query module in Python that returns all the labels from nodes? Deploy it in Memgraph GraphRAG container. So let's see what will happen. I have essentially asked the agent, in this case, it's Claude Opus from Copilot. So the Copilot is the agent inside the VS Code, and it uses a Claude Opus in this case. And you can see that what user wanted is it kind of, this is the context it has and the inference that it's doing. So one of the things it did is essentially read the skill Memgraph Python query modules to understand how it works, and it also checked is there a Memgraph GraphRAG running? Yeah, is there a Memgraph container with the GraphRAG running? And then it generated a script. So all that kind of knowledge is built essentially into this skill. So now it essentially wrote the skill, the query module, and it wants to move the Python script from my machine to actual container, because we need to move it to actually run it. So now the Docker is copying that get all labels query module to actual. Okay, this failed because of the MG console execute. Okay, it autocorrects itself. That's cool. So this is the problem with calling the MG console, not with the actual skill. And then we are calling query module. Let's see if that will work. And yeah, we got the labels from the Memgraph container. So just to give you an idea, what happened is it gave me the query that it ran, and I'm going to go back to lab, and I should be able to run this. So it wrote the get all labels, and return the labels, and I got the labels back. So what happened is that the Copilot wrote a Python script. It understands the Memgraph Python API from like the get-go because it read the skill, and then it moved it to the Memgraph container, and then it actually tried to run it because I said it needs to load it and try to run it to be able to test it, and we got the results back, and it was able to actually do it. And if we run mg, yeah, I will run that in the end, but essentially get all labels is the actual file here, I assume. Yeah, so yeah, that's the procedure that we are running. Yeah, and it was called also here from mg console, used to actually to run it. Okay, cool. So let's try something else. So the Python is super easy. Let's try to do it in Rust. Why? Because the Python is obviously the language that is interpreted. You just copy paste it and the interpreter picks it up and it knows how to use it. But when you need to compile it, it's much harder. So let's say, can you write a Rust query module that will count all the nodes in Memgraph. Deploy the module to the what's the name? Memgraph GraphRAG container to Memgraph GraphRAG container. Okay, so the user wants to create a Rust query module, and you can see that agent read the skill. What I maybe didn't highlight is that it is super important to name the skill the way you will kind of prompt it. So the key here is to actually name the skill name as you would kind of write in a natural way to what query module means to you. So yeah, Memgraph Rust query modules is kind of the obvious here. So yeah, now it wants to edit something, but yeah, let's see what will happen. So I'll just kind of allow it to do everything. I won't kind of be too concerned about reviewing. So it created some lib file. That's, I guess, the implementation of getting all the nodes. Now it's doing something interesting. So it's cloning the this RSMGP, which is essentially bindings for Rust API, and they're needed, and they're actually described in the skill. I will show you in a second. So when you go to Rust query modules, when you go to skill, there is essentially a definition that it needs to pull that. It needs to pull that to be able to actually use it. Some point. Yeah, it's defined somewhere in skill. Yeah, so this is it. Okay, it's doing something. Let's focus on the terminal. It's compiling the inside of mg build. So for those who are not aware, in order to compile it, you need kind of the cargo compile. You need the Rust compiler. You need cargo, etc., and everything is available in mg build, which is the containers that we are using to actually build Memgraph and build Rust query modules. So it's kind of our specific way of building Memgraph. And that's why that is interesting in this context of the skill, because we know how to build these things. So it has some problems about missing imports. That's okay, yeah. But what you probably didn't know is that you need that mg build container, and we wrote that in the skill, and there is a high chance that this will work because we have built that specific knowledge into that skill that LLM kind of read through. So essentially, what will happen now is we would be able to have a custom built graph component in Rust that is being run in Memgraph just by writing a single prompt. That's the point here. Okay, now it's copying that SO. So yeah, let's see if this will work. So essentially loads all query modules in Memgraph, and it called it count nodes, count all nodes. Let's see if it works. Something is not working. There is no procedure. Let me see. Oh, it finds something. Maybe he called it a different way. And we got count 354. And I think that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So, what happened is we were able now to build a Rust query module inside of MG build with the proper API just by writing a single prompt and describing what we want to build, and that was actually built and moved to the Memgraph container that is running, and we can kind of immediately test it. So that's why this is interesting. Now imagine yourself like trying to build something with Memgraph and actually describing like I want to build this graph algorithm that does like these three things, and you can actually kind of compile it in Rust or C++ and immediately deploy it inside and actually test how that works. Obviously, you will need to reiterate on the algorithm side, but that kind of experience of kind of being how easy it is to deploy it to the actual database is kind of mind-blowing in a sense. That's pretty much it what I wanted to showcase, but there are a few more things I need to say. So we have this enterprise GraphRAG Jumpstart program. Essentially, we are building with the POCs, with the companies that are interested in building GraphRAG projects with Memgraph. If you want, you can kind of register at memgraph.com GraphRAG. If your project is interesting and you are kind of considering Memgraph, you should definitely do it because you get like a helping hand for 2 weeks. Obviously, if the project is promising, and kind of we help you build it. What Matea said is we'll have a more community calls. So in a week's time, Marco will talk about how to use atomic GraphRAG or like a single undefined execution layer. You'll see, and it's next week. So February 17th. Now we can move to the questions and answers if there are any questions.
Thank you, Ante, for the great presentation. This was really useful and very clear, and the demo was spotless, so that's always good.
Everything worked.
Yeah. As Ante said, now we can have a Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. But while we wait, can I ask you like your opinion on where do you see agent skills being most impactful, day to day on engineering work or any other stuff you think?
It's interesting because like in this particular example, if somebody, let's say that somebody wants to build a query module in Rust and use it in Memgraph, and they probably know Rust, like they probably know something about Rust, and now when they come to Memgraph, they have no idea what they can do with query modules in Rust, like how they can compile them, how they can deploy them in Memgraph, how they can use them, what's the API. But if they go to the skills and just skim through the skills and see the references there, they will kind of immediately connect of how these things work. So it's just like an operation of actually going here and let me go to VS Code. So going to the actual Rust query modules, and then going to the actual skill or the reference and see, okay, so this is how the Vertex API looks like and how I can call it. And they can essentially very quickly understand what the best practice is around that. And then when we talk about today's engineering, they don't need to write the big complex prompts because they have this dynamic skill. Rather, they can just write a simple command of write that in Rust query module, and every context will be loaded dynamically. The skills can be called also dynamic context selection, but yeah, it's an that would be the case. So kind of to answer generally, getting very quickly to the right prompt context that you essentially need, and understanding how what is the best practice behind that skill because it's written. So yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. If you have any useful links, you can post them in the chat so people can check it out and maybe jumpstart with it. But we do have one question. Question from Troy. MCP has context bloat when too many tools registered. The agent skills metadata are all loaded in GP agent prompt. How does that not cause general purpose agent skill bloat the same as MCP?
Yeah, so when you load the MCP, you have when you load the tool, you have description, the name, the arguments, how the function is being called. There is a lot more context, and the skills are just 64 characters for the name, and I think 1,000 characters for the description that you can use. Or 500. I'm not sure. It's on the agent specification page. But basically, so just these two things in the metadata are loaded. So the MCP is loading the whole description, function prototype, and everything immediately, and there are no limits to that. And what started happening is that people started to expose an MCP. So they started to expose their, let's say, web API. So you have like I don't know, 1,000 endpoints in your API, and they start to expose in those 1,000 endpoints as functions and or tools, and that takes much more context than 1,000 skills with the name and description. That's the difference between MCP and skills.
Yeah. I don't see any other question.
Yeah,
So
just to add to that, I think that like some of the agent building libraries like LangGraph already has that lazy context loading for MCP servers. So that's a bonus, and I think in standard they will also add that like lazy loading for the tools so that you don't load all the tools from all the servers.
yeah, thank you, Ante. Thank you again. So if there are no more questions, I guess that's it. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. It was really fun, and I really like this community call because agent skills are something that is fairly new to me, and I guess to many of our participants. So it was useful to see that firsthand. But yeah, the recording will be available on our on-demand page. I've just posted a link to that in our chat. And yeah, if you're experimenting with agent skills, agent, or anything graph related, feel free to jump on our Discord server. We are hanging out there and answering questions all the time. So yeah, we'd love to hear more about that. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you on our next community call on Tuesday. Bye, everyone.
See you. Bye bye.